So how was everyone? Hey, was Tracy awesome or what? Yeah, I think there's a lot of times you'll hear a motivational speaker and it's almost talking at you. And what you saw with Tracy is a conversation. And I can't think of a more appropriate lead-in to where we're going to go today. And it's really around how do you show up when you're an advocate. Now, I have to share in full disclosure, I was a community organizer back in the late 70s. I actually went to that little school down the road that's the lighter blue of the two. Although I was on faculty at Duke for 4 years at the business school. It was it wasn't a hard 4 years. I think competition and assertiveness makes us better. And so if you're an advocate, you have to assert. If you're shy and in the corner, you're likely not to be heard. I loved what Sarah said this morning about getting in the legislature. It's not about talking to the Congress person, it's talking to their assistant. They do the real work. And that's what I've found. You think you know where the targets are. It's not that at all. It's around a coffee urn. It's around a bar with a beer in your hand. It's a glass of Chardonnay, and you happen to glance to the left and you go, "Hi, how are you? Have you ever met anyone that's been affected by lung cancer?" And you would say, "Yes, you have." It's that simple inquiry that is an advocacy. It's that simple passion to say, I want to invite you into a conversation that's powerful. But we don't know that yet. It's about discovery. It's also about being vulnerable. That's why I had to ask Tracy that question. If you're not willing to be vulnerable, then step back and consider yourself again. If you're a physician and not willing to be vulnerable and say, I don't have the answer yet, then step back and reconsider. Because advocacy is first, like taking a long trip in your car. You check the oil, you check the radiator. If you don't know the answers, you go to your local mechanic. You say, how are we going to go down this road and not break down? So it's serious business, but it's also great reward. So my engagement with you, and this is an engagement, it's not a talk. You're going to actually give about 80% of this presentation yourself. You know that, right? Because I can't think of speaking with you unless you're part of the voice. So where I'd like to go, after 35 years of being at Duke, being at PricewaterhouseCoopers as the Chief Learning Officer, being in the streets, actually with LCI, going back to my roots of advocacy, starting with one voice, one conversation, to leading to many, I think it's a powerful step out today at this summit to say, what about you? What is your plan to become an advocate? My job is to give you some tools in your back pocket that you can remember so you'll never go out and advocate in one single way again, but you'll look at the conversation ahead and have many approaches you can use. I'm going to leave lots of space during this time for you to interrupt. Say, hey, Jim, can we go over here? Because an engagement is about not steering a straight path. It's actually a little bit of wandering. I don't know about you, but as an adventurer, I like to go off the beaten path. So think of this conversation as where you want to take it. Yeah, I've got some things prepared. But you know what? If we missed 35% of this presentation, then we went to the right space for the remainder of it. Okay? Is everyone ready to get started? Yeah? Oh, come on. Are you really ready to get started? Okay, thank you. So, you know, I love poetry because there's no defenses to a good poem. There's simply no defenses. And Mary Oliver, because she's so embraced in nature, she wrote this wonderful poem. Because often I find myself in a world where there's a lot coming at me on my agenda. You know, I open my Mac up and there's 42 appointments that day, and I don't take the time I need to prepare. And Mary Oliver really summed it up. Wherever I am, the world comes after me. It finds me. It offers me busyness. It does not believe that I do not want it. Now I understand why the old poets of China went so far, so high into the mountains, then crept into the pale mist. Are you finding your pale mist? Are you finding that place that's quiet for you to go introspectively and think about, this is my day, as Tracy said, this is my purpose, and this is what I must do. So I'm not drifting along with what the world expects of me. I think that's so important before we ever begin, is to recommit, to reaffirm, what is this day about for me? And then making some detours away from where world will take us in our agenda. This is the most important question. Whenever you walk into a room, what's the most important, unique thing that my engagement, my audience needs to understand about me? Can you see me? And we often don't ask that question. We have a script, we have a speech, we have an appointment. If we're a pharmaceutical rep, we have a product, we've got to present, we've gone through lots of training, but what do they see in you, the influencer? If you're the physician, how do they know you're the right physician for them? Because those are the questions, then, the little voice of the mind of the audience that you have to first ask yourself. Where's my unique value? So, do things once, use them twice. That's called learning while you're doing. You heard a lot of what's a great influencer and what's behind the wall or the picture of what you just saw so brilliantly and humanly communicated in this room. You know, thinking about what is your unique qualification, and that's usually from the soul, it's from the heart. It's not from the cognitive, intelligent mind, it's from what's driving you. Number two, you know, what is the credibility you bring? Any of these stories brought immediate power because it tells you why I'm here, not what I'm about to tell you or share with you in knowledge. The experiences that they need to know, your audience or your influencer group, which could be digital, it could be in a room like this, it could be on a street corner, it could be a stranger. To me, it's a lot of Airbnb professionals, or it may be someone who's visiting me on my sailing charters. And it's just as simple as sharing a simple story and then finding I have a connection. Literally, we're so connected around this subject, and it's so pervasive. Have I been invitational to others? And then this shows up, what we just saw in this room. You know, have you asked how others might want to help? And this is where assertiveness can look like a question or an inquiry. I find so often we find today the model is pounding on the table and demanding things when a powerful question can do the job with sincerity and respect, even at a greater extent and power. So thinking about what you just saw and creating influence, you all saw the models of that in the stories that we just shared together. And I lost my clicker. There it is. So, EQ, emotional intelligence. Have you heard of these terms before? Yeah. So this is, when I say introspection and deep thought about self, and as a clinical social worker, I found this to be so important in translating to scientific. I spent 12 years with R&D teams working on oncology drugs, HIV suppressant drugs, really breakthroughs, orphan drugs. And what I found a lot of times was those researchers had a driving passion, yet they had never opened the chapter to emotional intelligence. When they did clinic, they were told, you know, I love your knowledge, but there's no bedside manner here. You may have heard that in the medical field, right? It's not something you cover a whole lot in medical school, but it's hugely important to getting to this driving purpose and getting others to come on board. So when you think about your story, self-awareness. Does the world see me the way I see myself? How do we get that feedback loop? You heard a lot of spouses in these stories. You heard a lot of, you know, support. So who helps you see yourself 2020? I've been married 42 years. I get a lot of feedback. A lot of feedback. And sometimes I go, la, 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 you know. James, the photographer, is my son. So, you know, I count on my sons, I count on my wife, I count on people like Paige to say, are we on track? Are we in alignment? So getting really good feedbackers, as we say in the field, getting people who are really honest to say, Jim, the way you see it's the way I'm seeing it, and this is with a room for you to be even more powerful in what you're doing. They're my guardians. I really look at it as my guardians. You know, they're the people watching for where's the side of the road. You don't want to run off the road of who you are. Self-monitoring emotions. You know, what I loved about Tracy, she was self-monitoring and she was declaring that it was going to be quite an emotional experience, and she went there anyway. She went there anyway. In your stories, you went to places of vulnerability and you didn't shy away from it. You were transparent. My Stories of Nigeria says there's cultures where it's perfectly okay to break down. A lot of times in America, we don't accept that. That's weakness. It's enormous power when you authentically show how I'm feeling on the inside, because guess what? The world may be feeling that too and hasn't heard it in a long time. So how we express what we're feeling, how we, as we say in clinical psychology, how you catharsis, is powerful because you're creating a new world. And I call it a safe container. We're in the same safe container, or safe harbor if I'm a yachter, which I am. When you're in a storm, you go to a safe harbor where there's breakwaters. You have to communicate that through trust and by sharing. The more I share who I am, the more trust I build in the community, and then I'm building a place where we can all be in the same spot. Socially aware of others. Am I taking care of the others? You just had a partner conversation. Did you take care of each other in that? How did you do that? So empathy leads to other things like where's their alignment, where's their common interest, that begins to move us towards managing social interactions, right? Now I know where we're going. That's one of the reasons why last night I asked, where were you born, right? Where do you live now? What do you do? What do you want out of tonight? Your hope. There's a simple rule in social interactions, especially in the early moments, and that is share something personal and then share something professional. We're much more comfortable in our professional identities often than sharing our personal identities. Where I'm born is personal. What I do now, where I'm from, that's a professional. So give people time to pace. You know, the one complaint about Lance Armstrong, yeah, he was on performance drugs, but was he was so far in front of his fellow riders, they got no benefit from seeing how good he was as a cyclist. And they really did not like that. So pacing with others, knowing how to manage the social interaction is let's start slow, and then we're gonna speed up together, but I'm not gonna leave you in my dust, right? Passion will preserve us, persevere when difficulties arrive. And it's that passion to actually step back and go, why am I here, even though this is a difficult conversation, and why will I stay at this table? Now, this is a negotiation technique, but most conversations are negotiations in disguise. It's with your doctor, it's with your caretaker, it's with your wife, it's with life in general. So looking at how do you turn to your passion, rather than attacking, rather than becoming aggressive with the world, and saying, why am I here? And restating your purpose. You know, Paige, we may disagree on some things, but I want to tell you, your purpose is crystal clear. That's a way I may have a violent disagreement with her point of view, but I admire and honor where her purpose and her mission is. So finding ways that you go back to purpose, even when you're in challenging, maybe even disrespectful conversations, because a lot of times, anyone had a Jack Russell dog before? Please don't get one. I had one called Mickey Mouse. And Mickey did not know his size. He was only about this big, but he would take a Doberman Pinscher on. He'd take a horse on. He'd take an elephant on if it came in front of him. And so it was just knowing that a lot of times he would give a big bark, and yet he was scared to death in his bones. Have you ever met individuals like that? I want you to focus on Mickey Mouse, the little terrier, because a lot of times people who are most afraid are most assertive at us, and we can't let that distract us from where we need to go in helping them. So managing socially, your passion will help you persevere. Empathy, you've given me some examples of this along the way, so it's really saying, this is what I'm hearing, and then really responding with others with that feeling state. If I ask you what you had for breakfast this morning, what would you tell me? Paige, what did you have for breakfast this morning?
I had eggs and bacon.
How were they cooked? Scrambled. Bacon too?
No. Yes, it was fried or baked.
So looking at empathy is saying, how did you feel about what you ate? How was it cooked? And that's a conversation. After every conversation, we're asking, I knew I had a conversation about lung cancer, but how did it feel to have that conversation? And I always use that metaphor of, how was it cooked? And I think about that as magic. A great chef makes magic. They make even difficult things to cook feel easy and taste great. And that's where empathy comes in. It's how you approach it, the self-awareness, and really looking at your own emotions. A lot of clearing the fog and when you're influencing is actually not starting with the typical flow, which is over here with content first. I was once in a serious auto accident, and the police officer came up to the door. Literally, I was thrown 250 feet off the road in the air, landed in a ditch. And I heard something like this when I came out of my concussion. License and registration, please. That's content that the police officer needed for his accident report. Where do you think I wanted him to start? What just happened here? I noticed your car is in the ditch and it's, are you okay? Are you okay? So when we start conversation with context, it's a discovery of what the condition and the situation is versus immediately getting what I need in terms of knowledge. And this is hugely important because it's not judgmental, it's simply saying, let's start on the same page. Now, after we start with context, what are we seeing? And it's a wonderful place to just say, okay, now I'm seeing it from your point of view. I said, you know, I can't move my left arm, my car's totaled. How are the other people? He hadn't gone over to seeing the other people in the other car, and so that got him away from my car for a little bit, and he went and checked, they were okay. But always starting with exploring context and see where are we on different pages is hugely important because we don't understand. Caregivers can get context because they're seeing that broader picture and often can be very helpful to alignment to the bigger picture. We don't have to agree, but it's illuminating. When I just share with this is what I think, this is what I know, it tends to create immediate crisis of cognitive function. I don't see it the way you see it, so we're setting up conflicts. And then process is just, did you have fast food or did you have slow cooked food today? Did you bake it? Was it a crock pot or was it a microwave? So process is what's the speed we can go in the conversation, how slow, how fast, and that comes back to the pacing with others, comes to self-awareness. These are your tools. If I talk about a toolkit for advocating, there's certainly over here stating our ideas clearly, and then I think we forget this a lot, listening. What do you think after I've advocated for a point of view? Reveal your mental maps. This is how we're thinking about it. You're seeing dots on a screen. I'm going to share you what I see as from a diagnostic standpoint. But now we understand the two screens we're looking at, and we can understand the points of reference. So revealing mental maps, we often forget this piece. Engagement with others really comes back to your EQ. How are you listening, navigating, and responding to all of those social cues, or are you ignoring them? On the inquiry side, are you really asking for views and not responding and reacting? Anyone been in a protest? If you really believe in something, you march for it. What happens at a protest? There's a counter-protest. Yeah. March on Washington, Martin Luther King, Me Too movement. Don't expect that what you're thinking is going to be agreed by the world. It often is not. So asking others, what do you think? What's driving you? What's your purpose? What's your passion? Is a powerful way to build at least détente. At least building a space where we can begin the conversation without accepting any swaying or influencing. Tell why. What's important? Why does this matter? And this is an important question to actually qualify. So for Tom, he's asking, why would people run in my 5K race in Greenville? He needs to have the answer to that question, right? Because Eastern North Carolina is underserved. I grew up there. I lived in Eastern North Carolina most of my life. It does not have the power of what I've seen in the Triangle. That's Jim's point of view. So yes, that's super important because we need to build the foundation of understanding disease, hospitalization needs to be improved, physicians need education. So tell why you're passionate, but don't leave that as the little voice that's not expressed. Part of your challenge is letting the little voice get expressed to the larger world. You with me on that one? Having the courage to listen to yourself. I don't care how skilled you are socially or in emotional intelligence. Have you ever lost your temper, lost your emotions? Yeah? No? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. I think we all do. Literally, we drive the car off the road. We're too hard on someone else. We're just angry like this little, Jack Russell I described. He's angry at the world because he's scared. So this is a very emotionally impacted environment that we're working in. So it's okay if you make mistakes. You walk in too deep or too fast, but here's the key. It's the humility to back up and say, you know what? I blew it yesterday. I lost my cool, I became out of control, and I want to apologize for that. I oversteered. And here's what's really important. Let that person know why, what was driving you. Because if you don't, there's assumptions about the emotions that drove you to that mistake. I wasn't angry at you, I was angry at myself. I wasn't angry at you, I was uncertain what to do, so I just did it anyway. But we have to come back to purpose and what drove us to go too far. And then declare it as an oversteering error. And then ask for one thing. Ask for that person to become your coach. When you ever see me going off the road again, could you help me steer back into the center of the road instead of running off again? Because I don't want to hurt you, which shows future intent. But if we don't clean up mistakes we make in our relationships, don't expect them to heal fast. They'll heal much slower. Another part of being an advocate is coming back to center and showing you care all the time about the other person, the other point of view. Okay, I have one more destination I want to take us to because we've done a lot of dancing around what a good story is this morning. What's your model for telling a good story? So this is something that I think is hugely important because when you know how you're sharing your story, you're going to become a lot more effective. And one of the things Paige mentioned this morning is that LCI would love to hear your stories. And so I'm going to give you a formula. It's called STAR L. I've taught this in every country in the world except Antarctica. It works. It works. So when you're thinking about a story, think about context, as that model showed us. Start with context. What was the situation that you were facing, right? So I'm going to do this model. I'm going to share my story while I'm going through it. So it was October 1st, 2011. My dearest friend for 33 years passed away from lung cancer. Stage 4, he and I were in Istanbul, Turkey. We'd spent a week in Nigeria, 2 weeks in Istanbul. We were doing executive education transformation work. Steve told me he wasn't feeling well. He had some pains in his lungs, he had some pains in his legs. I thought it was deep bone thrombosis from doing all the flights we'd done. It wasn't until I got back to Charlotte International Airport, and Steve, who had been a world traveler with me for over 25 years, couldn't find his bag. Didn't know he needed to go through customs, and I lost him in the airport. Unusual. I knew something was going on. Steve was diagnosed about 2 months later. What they thought was pneumonia was actually stage 4 lung cancer. And he went into treatment. It was very fast, and he pushed me completely out of his life. He didn't want me to be there with him in those stages of his treatment. Steve passed away. I didn't know what to do. I literally didn't know what to do to honor his life. It felt like a void. An old colleague of mine, a veteran colleague of mine, what do we call it? A colleague who I knew for a long time, Amy Sapow, who, we worked closely together at Burroughs Wellcome, Glaxo Wellcome. I said, I want to have coffee with you, which is the most dangerous thing to ever do with Amy Sapow, because she's going to find a role for you in lung cancer initiative. So fair warning, she's going to get you involved. She's the best advocate I know. She said, Jim, could you get involved? You're down at Wrightsville Beach. You have a sailing boat. Could you take my group, my staff out for an expedition and do what you do with big corporations? And let's look at our culture, leadership, and what we've got to become. And that was a key word. What do we have to become? Because what Amy understood was it's evolution. It's emergence. It's not where we are today. It's what's next. What are we becoming? And so I said, yes, I'll do that. And here we are, 8 years on. And now I'm vice president of the board at LCI. Because what Amy found was that spark, that voice I didn't know how to act on. A lot of times we don't know. It took me 2 years to even ask the question, what am I becoming in this void? And what do I do to honor a life? And Amy said, get involved. Now the tension, what I was feeling inside, I'm not sure I can do this. I haven't been in social work for over 28 years. Can I really step in and do what I do in a nonprofit? And I also had tensions because I didn't have my emotions in check. I really hadn't reflected enough. What actions I took? I said, Amy, I'm going to start with this, but know that I want to get further involved. I don't know how, but let's just see how it goes. But that was enough for my little voice to act and for Amy to say, well, Jim, we got this board opportunity over here. And so there we were. Now I was on a path, and it was like a river flow. And as a result, we're kind of here today, and I'm here today. And so for me, it met that purpose of honoring a friend. To me, it met that purpose as I discovered at this phase of my life, I want to give something back to North Carolina and back to its citizens and actually back to Eastern North Carolina. Tom, I'm with you on that run, okay? Because if we don't act on that inner voice, it nags at us and it nags at us when it could be a motivation for us. And I believe that's the key to our souls. Don't lose your soul. Your stories, when you share them, excites other souls, and then you become really aimed at purpose together. That's my story, and that's my example of a star L, okay? One last tip. Think about it as if it were a novel. The situation is the foreword. It was a dark, stormy night, and there was rain coming down. It's pouring. Tension. I was afraid of lightning and being struck. Speak in first-person terms when you tell your story. Don't edit the emotion out. Don't edit the graphic visual that you're describing. That's why I push you so hard on behaviors. How did you feel? Scrambled eggs, right? How was it, and what was it at the same time? And then always get back to, this is where you invite others, learnings. I learned this, you may learn something very different from your story, but share what the learning is. And that means I can be vulnerable and I can make mistakes without judgment. But this is what I learned. And that's declaring yourself and your soul. Stories help us become what we want to become, and it's actually evidence that we are making progress on our journey. So often we feel very alone in our journeys. Stories are a way to reveal where we're going without saying, this is where I'm going. It's tacit learning. Let me share with you a story. And just by telling that story, you catharsis, right? Feels like therapy. But also, you're inviting others to share theirs, which is all about discovery. Again, in 10 years working in tribal cultures, you find tribes had a wonderful way, centuries old, of just sharing a story that educated others as to what to do next without telling them. What does management do? It tells us what to do. So this is a channel, a frequency that never comes up in organizations as complex and as big as they are today, with shareholder value they have to create. It's sharing a story is a beautiful tacit way. Moms are great at tacit stuff. Do your homework, we'll get ice cream. You move people. Men have a little more problem with this, at least traditionally. But when you share your story, you're asking to come along on a journey and you can't help but the osmosis of learning from the power, the influence, and the courage of those actions. So get out there and share it. Stop by and share your story. We're going to have videos ready. Social media today works. So step out, experiment. I just want to say, because I've gone a little beyond my time, and that's because of you guys. I said it's 70% you and 30% me. But can we just give ourselves a round of applause for the community we created today? I thank you very much for your patience.